Kind of a follow-up to the little learn to play kind of video that we did. Decided I was going to go and try to do some of the highlights of some of the heroes, kind of give a breakdown of what they're about for people who they know how to play, they are familiar with the heroes, but they just don't know what the deck composition is supposed to be like. They just can't get it nailed down, or they just don't understand what a hero is really about. So I figured I'd start with a fairly simple one today. Bravo, Showstopper. Fairly decent competitive hero. Relatively simple one, but there are elements to his construction that lend themselves really, really well to competitive play, particularly being very defensive. So Bravo the Showstopper is a Guardian hero with the hero ability Action. Pay 2 resources until the end of turn. Your attack action cards at the cost of 3 or greater gain Dominate, and then go again. So being able to give your really meaty attacks Dominate means that they can only defend with 1 card from hand. This includes defense and defense reactions. So you heavily limit their ability to defend themselves against some of your nastier attacks. Bravo's weapon, Anathos, is a two-handed Guardian Hammer. With, once per turn, you can pay 3 resources to attack. If you have 2 or more cards in your pitch zone with a cost of 3 or greater, Anathos has +2 power. And this lends itself really well to some real offensive powerhouse moves. You can pitch to attack with it, and then you can, during the reaction step, just pitch to slap a pummel on there. If you've pitched 2 cards with a resource cost 3 or greater to swing with the hammer and to do the pummel, then when damage calculation happens, you're looking at 10, and that's not insignificant. And it's also fairly easy to do because you only need the pummel and a couple of cards. Being able to attack with such a very strong weapon means that you can spend more resources on defending yourself on your opponent's turn. Just blocking a few low to the ground hits where they're relevant, or even using some really strong defense reactions to block really, really large attacks. Such as we got Staunch Response. Now you can go ahead and block 5 damage off of an attack with a Staunch Response, pitch a card to do so, and still have a couple cards to swing with the hammer. And so Bravo, because of Anathos, kind of lives up to his namesake as a Guardian. He can defend really, really well. In addition to that, he features some of the strongest attack actions in the game. Crippling Crush here comes in for a base 11, which is enormous. But with that power comes the big resource costs. You need 7 resources to be able to fire this guy off. It's very similar to Righteous Cleansing, which is 7 for 10 damage for 7 resources, or Spinal Crush, which is 5 to do 9. These are not insignificant attacks. And so the mantra for Bravo is basically you can play a very defensive game and wait for your turn to be able to get some momentum. And things that help you on more defensive turns are your auras. So Bravo has a selection of auras he can use to set up and just tank it out, and then have what he needs to come back on the following turn. Things like Showtime, which lets you tutor the attack that you're ready to go for, and then at the start of your next turn, you destroy it and you get a draw card, ensuring that you have resources to play the thing you just tutored for. Or things like Stamp Authority, which if you have 2 or more cards in your pitch zone with a cost of 3 or greater, you get an Intellect for the turn, allowing you to start your next turn with more resources or just have more flexible blocking options. Other defensive options that Bravo has access to are things like Blessing of Deliverance, which rewards you for having high cost cards on the top of your deck, because at the next action phase you destroy it, reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, and gain 1 life for each card with a cost of 3 or greater. Combine that with things like Sigil of Solace, which is an awesome generic that any hero can play, and being able to gain life means that you can just take some of the smaller hits and not have to worry about defending them. Now, because of the expensive nature of your attacks, you're going to want to see a lot of pitch blue cards in your deck. Most of the deck's going to be pitch blue. And that means that you'll end up with enough resources to be able to do all the things you need to do. Another thing, you need to be able to defend. So another attribute of cards in the deck you're going to want are that they defend for 3. We have some cards in this deck that break the rule, like Sigil, which gaining 3 life is similar to locking 3. And there are a couple other instances that I'm running in here that don't necessarily follow this rule of blocking for 3, but I just like the flexibility that they bring. Things like Remembrance or Tome of Find All, which have become pretty standard in most Bravo lists. So the general rule of thumb: card needs to block for 3, card needs to pitch for blue. Which means that if you're doing Bravo in a limited environment, he's fairly easy to draft, as long as you're following those rules. For constructed, you get a little more flexible with your options. Now, the other attribute that is common to the Guardian cards is the keyword Crush. Crush is a effect that if the attack does 4 or more damage to a hero, you produce some sort of effect. On Crippling Crush, you make them discard 2 cards at random. On Spinal Crush, you take away their ability to have Go Again and make it so they can't get Go Again. Even on some of his lighter attacks, like Crush the Weak, if you can squeak 4 damage out with this thing, then they won't be able to play action cards with a base power of less than 3, or 3 or less, rather. And that means that you want to be able to have ways to threaten damage. Well, Bravo himself, as we went over the hero ability, helps a lot for these larger attacks, forcing your opponent to spend armor in order to not get crushed. But for your lighter attacks, that's where attack reactions like Pummel, or that's not Pummel, it's where attack reactions like Pummel come into play. Being able to add damage onto your attack, and being able to threaten a Pummel might force your opponent to overblock. Pummel, as we went over earlier, as an attack reaction, adds a lot of damage, but it doesn't just add 4 to a weapon. It can add 4 to attack action cards with a cost of 2 or greater and get the hit trigger to make them discard a card. Meaning if you can come in on them with a buckling blow, let's say, and then pitch to Pummel onto it, for a total of 6 resources, you're threatening 10 damage, 4 more after they've assigned their defense, and now if they hit, they discard a card. If you do 4 or more, you get to debuff one of their equipment. So your lower attacks should not be just cast aside or written off as pitch only. There is a place for them. Pummel and the Crush mechanic in general are one of the reasons why the sideboarded, or I guess main board, but often frequently played defense reactions like Sink Below and Fate Foreseener see a lot of play. Being able in the reaction step to pay 0 to add defense is what stops people from getting crushed pretty regularly. And against Bravo, they're probably going to be doing a lot of this from Arsenal. So don't get too dependent on your crushes, but just know that you have ways to help threaten and kind of push the crush through. Moving on past the hero and his action cards, got the equipment. So Iron Rot Boots is an option that you can play, but generally you're going to be wanting to do the Mage Master Boots. The Mage Master Boots allow you to successfully fire off a Tome of Find All and still have a turn after you do it. Tome of Find All does not have Go Again, so using your action point to play it basically ends your turn in most instances. So we use the Mage Master Boots. They sit down there just waiting for the tome to show up so that you can get some life when you play it from your arsenal, get some cards, and threaten a lot of damage. Another thing that the Guardian has access to is the Helm of Isen's Peak. As a headpiece, it defends for one time with the Battle Worm. But on a turn where you have to go crazy blocking because they had a super offensive turn, you might end up with a single card in your hand. You can use that single card, pop your Helm of Isen's Peak, and get a slightly larger hand for the turn, giving you potentially the option to really shift your momentum and take the offensive back. Another thing that Bravo has access to is the Tectonic Plating. As a legendary chess piece, once per turn action, you can pay a resource to create a Seismic Surge token and Go Again. much like with the helm, if you're on a turn where you only got one card, nothing better to do with it, you can pitch that card. If it pitches for 2 or 3, you could do a Seismic Surge token and then pop your helm. And as for what the Seismic Surge tokens do, the Seismic Surge tokens are an aura that goes into the play space, and the start of your next action phase, what it does is it essentially destroys itself to make your Guardian attack actions cost 1 less. Look around for some Seismic Surge here. But this can sometimes salvage turns where you might not have had enough resources to do the attack you want. So when you know you're going to have excess resources, or when you know you got to take the turn off and try and get your second wind, that's what these equipment facilitate. The last piece of equipment that Rathe has access to, thanks to Crucible, is Crater Fist. So Crater Fist has an action: pay 3, destroy Crater Fist. Your attacks with Crush gain +2 this turn, go again. Not generally a very useful effect. Typically, you'll only have the resources to do it if you did the Mage Master or Tome of Fyendal. But that's not the main reason you play it. The main reason you play it is because it blocks for 2, and with the Temper effect, you'll put a -1 counter on it when the combat chain closes, and then you'll destroy it if it has 0 defense. So you can block for 2 with it once, block for 1. Being able to defend with equipment combined with cards in hand means that you have more flexible blocking options to stop on hit triggers. That way you don't have to overblock with resources from your hand. But that's basically the equipment loadout for Bravo. So just one more time, Bravo, lots of defensive capabilities. You're going to be doing a lot of taking a turn off to try and have a big, strong turn the next turn. And being able to threaten more damage with the same amount of defensive cards your opponent has means that you can just limit their ability to defend themselves. That's Bravo, and that's pretty much it.